G'day, how you doing? Adam Williams here from Adam Williams Creative. A big thank you goes to you guys actually. I've been thinking about this all week and I haven't said it. A big thank you to each and every one of you out there for for making this what it is. I could be here just talking to myself if it wasn't for you guys. And that wouldn't be half as much fun, that's for sure. So a big thank you goes to you guys for all the effort and tuning in each and every day. I know we've got a really big core audience out there, and it's just incredible that you give myself and photographers like Pamela the opportunity to come here and share her incredible work with us today. So we do have another great day today, another incredible photographer. Just a little bit of background. These photographers that I'm inviting to come on here are, they're my favorite photographers in actual fact, and I have a broad range of inspirations and photographers that inspire me, and Pamela is absolutely one of those. I've loved her work I think I probably discovered her work 5 or 6 years ago, and I've really been following as she's been changing and evolving as an artist as well, and we're going to find out a lot more about that today. A little bit more about Pamela. She is an AIPP Master of Photography. She is a Ravenswood Australian Women's Art Prize finalist for this year, 2020. The actual winner of that has not been announced yet, but it's among an incredible field of extremely talented photographers, artists. She is also the 2019 New South Wales AIPP Illustrative Photographer of the Year with an incredible body of work that we're going to see today. She was the 2019 winner of the Australian Photography Awards, the APA, is that correct, Pamela? Yeah, winner? Third place. Pamela's over there. She had a quizzical look and I just confirmed. Third place. That's incredible as well. In actual fact, the list of awards was enormous. It was as long as my arm. It was incredible. She has been a finalist or a winner of pretty much all the major photography and art prizes that you can imagine. There was one other one here as well. Oh, the big one. My favourite one in 2019. She was an Australian representative at the World Cup, the Photographic World Cup of 2019 for the AIPP. Let's jump over and say hello. Let me just change the camera here. Where are we? Oh, there we go. Microphone on. Hello, Pamela. Great to have you with us today.
Good morning, Adam. What a wonderful introduction. Thank you. I feel a bit, well, I hope I do you proud, Adam.
Oh, my pleasure. It's interesting actually, because we've been kind of talking about doing something together, maybe educational or workshops or something or other for on and off for a couple of years now, and it just so happens that we're going to do it live on YouTube, have a bit of a chat and go through your work.
Yeah, it's wonderful, and I really would like to thank you for giving me this opportunity. I'm a huge fan of your work as well, and I have to mention a few of those. When Adam and I first met, it was because for 3 years in a row, he beat me out of the Landscape Photographer of the Year for New South Wales 3 times in a row. So yeah, he's pretty impressive.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah.
Oh, you got that.
You absolutely deserve probably all 3 of those, Pamela. But yeah, I do remember each year being in the final with you there. Wow.
Yeah, it's fun stuff. But I'm just so impressed with what you're doing on this YouTube channel. I just want to say you've brought in such incredible photographers from such a diverse background, from the highly technical skills yesterday of Andrew Campbell. I was sort of blown away and thought, wow. And very, very beautiful stuff, to the, Mika Boynton, her aerials, the references to art. It's just been really interesting to watch all of these. I've actually watched every single one, Adam, and I think
thank you.
You've done a great selection. Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
So thank you. I'm honored to be part of it.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Thanks for joining us. All right. Well, we might just jump straight in, shall we? Do you want to share your screen?
Yes.
And for everyone at home, as we normally do, use the chat section for questions. I'll keep an eye on that, and I'll pass on the questions as we go. That's looking good. I can see your screen warming up there.
Is it coming through?
Yep, I can see the title screen, all good to go.
Okay. Well, again, thank you, Adam, for having me, and I'm looking forward to this presentation today.
Oh, me
Um,
too.
yeah, very, very different from some of the other presentations. Mine's very personal because my work really is sort of about my story, my life story. So all of my creative work has just sort of flowed from one step in my life to the next. So I thought I'd start from the beginning and share some of my background.
Oh, great. Looking forward to it.
Okay, so here we go. So I grew up in Wyoming, which is in the Rocky Mountains of the United States. And I'm sure there's plenty of you out there who've probably been there because it's an incredibly beautiful part of the world. Um, I was born in Nebraska and then moved to Wyoming when I was 3. So I'm from a big family. I've got 4 brothers and a sister. And you can see some of our earlier days here. There I am. And we're still hanging out together when we can. They're all living in the States at this stage. But it was a wonderful upbringing because it was outdoors. Our life was spent outdoors. Almost every single holiday was spent camping. Sitting by the campfire, singing songs. It was a really quite idyllic upbringing, I think, for a child. My dad was a professor. Many people in Wyoming actually live off the land. There's a lot of ranching, obviously a lot of mining as well, and tourism because of the particularly northern Wyoming, Jackson Hole and the Tetons and Yellowstone. They're all in Wyoming. But my dad was a professor, so he was a professor of mathematics at the University of Wyoming, which is the only university in Wyoming. So all 6 of his children got their undergraduate degrees, at least from the University of Wyoming. So that was kind of fun. I even I actually took a couple classes from my dad in math. I'm not sure I made him too proud, but I did my best. Oops, moving on. Why doesn't that want to go? There we go. So if you're familiar with Wyoming, you'll know that it's wild and it's cold. It's actually the least populated state in all of the United States. So I think there's still about, maybe even less now, but 2 people per square mile. So very few people. So if you've never met anybody from Wyoming, I'd like to introduce myself because there's not a lot of us. So it's a wild landscape. Wyoming is also an incredibly windy landscape. This is actually just a photograph from the car as we're driving over Interstate 80, just outside of my hometown of Laramie. That's what the roads are like a good part of the year because we do get so much snow, or at least wind, and it looks like a lot of snow. Probably doesn't snow as much as it used to there. It's just so rugged and so beautiful, and a lot of it actually reminds me of sort of the outback Australia. The high plains remind me of some places I've visited in the outback.
Yeah.
So it's really beautiful. This is a place called Vidavoo. That's obviously an Indian name. It's about 16 miles. I still use miles outside of my hometown that we used to go up to all the time. I used to cycle up, and it's just a part of the world that still plays a big role in my American family's life. That's just a picture I took out of the window as we're driving from, again, on Interstate 80, because a lot of people who travel through the States go straight through Wyoming on Interstate 80 because it goes all the way across. And if they're going up to Yellowstone or that sort of thing, they'll turn off and go north. But that's just what a lot of the landscape looks like. Pretty windy, pretty blustery. Yeah. But then we have bizarre Wyoming. This truly is an isolation sort of story. I'm sure a lot of you out there have probably seen the Tiger King. And I remember I got a text or an email from one of my brothers saying, did you really go to school with Joe, with the Tiger King? And I thought, what are you talking about? And so I had to go back into my old yearbooks, and voila, there am I. There's Joe. There's me again. So that was 1979 and 1980. And now he's known as Joe Exotic. So if you haven't seen the absolutely disturbing documentary, I don't even know if I recommend it, but that's, you get a few of those people from Wyoming as well. He's not from Wyoming, but he did go to high school there.
Yeah.
So in terms of photography, I suppose I was first influenced by Ansel Adams, like so many landscape photographers are. I mean, his work was just brilliant. It was something I never ever imagined I could really attempt. It was sort of kind of magic out there. Um, and as you know, as I grew as a photographer, I learned a little bit more about him and the post processing really that he did, and I appreciated that because obviously in my work I do a lot of processing as well. And I just thought he was brilliant. So I had that poster on my wall when I was a child, along, I think, with, I think it was David Cassidy was the other poster I had. um, so he was an early influence. So we'll talk about my travel journey from there to where I am now, but I still visit the Rocky Mountains on a regular basis, as often as I can, really. I was just there in January with, we had Christmas in the States and then went, to Wyoming and Colorado for, to do some skiing. So I've got a Mad King skiing family, and then I'm the snowshoer. So I guess, opposites attract. My husband loves his skiing. I love to snowshoe. He'll take a speedboat over a kayak, but it's been good. So this was just in January. Usually I'm on my snowshoes, which I absolutely love. I love just being out in the wilderness with no one else. There's a picture here of one of my brothers, Mark. He's ice climbing, and he said, "You want to come up and take a few photographs of me?" And I thought, oh, sure. So we, hopped up, and here I am trying to take a photo. But it was freezing cold and very steep getting up there, and I didn't actually even have my snowshoes on. So that was fun. That's my sister down there. We built a little snowman. I don't know why. Just having some fun.
Do you still get those snowshoes out in Australia, Pamela?
I do. I actually think we go up to Threadbow and Parish most years, and I take my snowshoes. It's beautiful up there. Yeah, I absolutely love it. So yeah, it's. I mean, I would take that over. I don't downhill ski anymore, but I did grow up cross country skiing. But I would take snowshoeing over any of it. There's no risk, little risk, so that's a good thing for me. So Wyoming still features in a lot of my work because it's obviously very close to my heart. So this is just one of the images that I created after a trip to Jackson Hole. It was actually in a town called Moose, which is just outside of Moose, Wyoming. Interesting name, and there's little moose. So this is just some bighorn sheep. I just loved the composition and the whiteness, the high key aspect of that. I just took that in January. It was wasn't in Wyoming. It was just outside of Vail, just off the side of the road. So I was thrilled to see them looking so beautiful. So yes, so I grew up, in the high plains of Wyoming, but the mountains are even higher. So this was the image that you were talking about, Adam, that was selected to represent Australia for the World Photographic Cup.
Yeah.
And it is a composite. I did a fair bit of work. The main feature that I really loved when I was working on this that was the shadow from the big mountain on the left-hand side. But yeah, it's a special image. I mean, that's up in Jackson Hole, outside of Jackson Hole.
Yeah, yeah. And so when you say composite, is it the background and the foreground are two separate images, or?
Well, I actually layered two backgrounds into this because I had a very, very high key background that I sort of overlaid the original, which was very similar, but there were a few houses and things that detracted from what I was trying to produce. So, and the horses were there. So that was the main compositing. It was the backdrop.
Yep.
For that image. Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful and soft and subtle, that background.
So that's just a picture, if you've been to Wyoming, of Snake River. So that was in the Snake River Canyon. Just that steam coming off the water. It gets so cold. So I remember this day I was out with my husband and it was 22 degrees below, and that's Fahrenheit. So really cold weather, but just stunningly fresh and clear. And that almost looks like one of these aerial photographs that we've been seeing, but it's not. I was actually standing on a bridge And that was the same day, same place for that photograph. And I just loved it because I felt looking down like I was looking into the clouds, but it was actually steam coming off of the water.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And just the tree laying down there. It just, I thought it was a really interesting perspective. So that's a bit about Wyoming and where I grew up. But I'll share a bit about my journey. So, you know, I grew up in Laramie, Wyoming, but when we were a young family, so I was 10 at the time, my dad was offered a sabbatical in Holland, the Netherlands. So my parents were incredible. They packed up 6 kids. The youngest was 2, the eldest was 12. And we headed to Holland for a year. They put us into Dutch schools, and we spent the year learning, you know, Dutch, learning about Europe. We did a bit of traveling, and it was a wonderful experience. And sort of really, I think, gave me and all my siblings a real wanderlust. You know, we loved travel. So that was when I was 10. And then 7 years later, so that was, you know, we went from Laramie over to Groningen. 7 years later, my dad had another sabbatical, mathematical sabbatical in South Africa. So I guess 4 of us went at that time because my older 2 brothers weren't, they were at university at the time. Went down and I spent my year 11 in South Africa, in sort of Johannesburg and Pretoria. And my parents were incredible because they let me quit school actually at the time and travel around South Africa with my choir. So I was singing in a little choir called the Orange Free State Youth Choir. And so we traveled and sang, and it was just such a memorable experience. Then back to the United States, where I did get my degree at the University of Wyoming in, you guessed it, computer science. I've never really used my computer science degree, and it's quite funny because one of my children, my youngest, Josh, is studying computer science right now. He's about to finish, and he sort of looks at me with strange face, saying, when I ask him questions about the computer, he says, you should know this stuff, Mom, but really I don't know that stuff. From there, I moved, it's sort of long story, but moved to Paris, France, and I spent 3 years living in Paris, which I absolutely loved. And, you know, I should be using my computer degree, but I didn't really. I worked for a company doing desktop publishing and translating because I was speaking French. And, you know, I washed boats on the River Seine, and I played in a band. I played the piano and did a bit of singing, and that was really fun. But after 3 years, I thought maybe it was time to start taking things maybe a little bit more seriously. So I went back to the States. I went to Arizona, and I did I got an MBA. So I studied at a school called Thunderbird, of all things, the American Graduate School of International Management. And then with that MBA, I moved to Tokyo. I went with a friend, and I took an opportunity to work with a school there. They wanted me to develop a program teaching cross-cultural communications to Japanese business people who were going to the States. So that was a bit of a hoot. That was a very interesting time in my life. And from there, I sort of traveled down through Southeast Asia, literally just traveling, ended up in Jakarta, Indonesia, where my best friend Jill was working. And she also had her MBA from Yale. And we started working for this company, and I was offered a job with USAID, and it was a 6-month contract. And I have to throw in there, all along, I was taking photographs. So my life was sort of documenting my life. There was nothing super special about my photography, but I'll get to that. Anyway, took a job for 6 months, USAID contract, and then about 5 months into it, I met my husband in Jakarta. So he wasn't my husband. We met, and ended up staying there for 7 years. So my first 2 kids were born up there. And it was a really wonderful time of our life. And after that, we moved to Sydney. And then a few years ago, we had the opportunity to move to Delhi, India for 3 years. And now we're back in Sydney. So that's sort of I'm just sharing that because it sort of shows where I've been and where I'm going to. So like I said, I was making totally unsophisticated life documentary. I've got so many scrapbooks and photo albums. You really wouldn't want to sit down
Brilliant.
with me. I did that yesterday looking for some photos, and boy, I spent the whole day. So like I said, I always had a little camera with me when I was younger. It got a little bit more sophisticated as I got a bit older. But after our years in Indonesia, so we moved to Australia. So it was Greg's country. He's Australian. I had 2 little kids and I had a third on the way. So I had 3 children under 3. And the work that I was doing was always market research. But at that stage in my life, I thought, I don't want to be working full time in an office away from these kids. So I love photography. I'm just going to start photographing children. So that's what I did. And I set up a little business in 2003. And Pamela Pauline Photography. And I started taking photographs of all my friends' children and everyone else's children on the North Shore, and doing sports photography. And, it wasn't what I would call super creative photography. It was portraiture. And I loved it. I really loved what I was doing. But then when we had that opportunity to move to India, we took it. So my little business sort of changed at that stage. Yeah, so moving to India was a real, our kids, I guess, were 9, 11, and 12. So some people would say, why would you do it? But it was actually one of the best things we've ever done, because it was such an eye-opening, incredible experience. Not that it was easy. I mean, I think anybody who's lived in India, probably even traveled to India, will tell you it's not an easy place. But it was sort of life-altering in a lot of ways. So there was a real big shift in my photography, partly because, I was maturing. My kids were getting older. They were at school. I had more time on my hands to sort of really focus. So I started really studying processing and Photoshop. So editing my photographs. And taking photographs of anonymous subjects, people I didn't know. It was a little bit, I guess I'd always done that with just little snapshots, but now I was really taking pictures of people and enjoying it, really enjoying it. But, in India, it's such an incredibly beautiful, visual country, but it's also an assault on all of your senses. So I started, I think, just because to maintain my sanity, I started to really extract color from the chaos. So that's when I really started, thinking, oh, Photoshop is really interesting. You can do these things. And I really enjoyed just focusing on the color, because I find I could hardly do just black and white in India, because it is just so stunning,
Yeah.
Yeah, the colors were
Beautiful.
incredible. The people, the smiles, the beauty, and the sense of style is absolutely incredible in India, really. So like I said, a lot of color extraction, desaturation. I played a lot with all sorts of Photoshop tools that I don't really use that much anymore. I guess it's when you first start learning these editing skills, sometimes you go over the top, you oversaturate. I'm sure, Adam, have you been there?
Oh, yeah. Every time I learn something new, I go over the top for a good couple of months. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very easy to go over the top. I was turning things into artworks using those little things. And but it was fun. I learned a lot, and I really studied hard for those 3 years up there. And at one point, I got into getting rid of absolutely all distractions. And that was fun. And I do a lot of that today. I actually do a lot of selecting to create my images. Again, there you go. I've always had my camera with me. There's my family looking gorgeous.
How did the kids go with how'd the kids go with the move over to India?
That was it was so interesting. It was probably hardest on my daughter in the beginning.
Yep.
But she's the one that she absolutely threw herself into charity work and that sort of thing. And it ended up being an incredible experience for her. I think just the hardship on the street was something that you all have to deal with. And but in the end, it was one of the best things we've ever done as a family. Yeah. So the temples were beautiful. Here I'm playing around with double exposure. And I had my first exhibition in Delhi with 3 other artists, and
Oh, wow.
that was a real hoot.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really fun in 2009.
And what's it like having an
Um,
exhibition in India? Do you get a big crowd coming through the door?
you know, it was an exhibition that was really marketed towards probably more expats than anything
Okay.
else. It was marketed through the school. They were going to the American Embassy School at the time. So yeah, there was a lot of people and Indians as well. But it wasn't like the masses of the public were coming in.
Hmm.
It was actually held in one of my friend's homes
Okay.
downstairs. She had this big space. Yeah, Jenny Chisholm, beautiful artist. So as I said, I grew so much as a person and as a photographer in India, and I just had to. I was so thrilled when I found this picture of me doing a headstand yesterday because I think that's probably the last headstand I've ever done. But yeah, so I continued to document our life there, and then we moved back to Sydney. So we were in the North Shore for a long time, 16 years, and after we moved back from India, I guess we just sort of had itchy feet. So we moved to Mona Vale, and I was immediately enraptured by the sky. I mean, the ocean is so special, and the sky is incredible. And I think it reminded me a little bit of the wide open skies of Wyoming. And also my parents were just on the other side of that big piece of water, so it was a natural fit for us to move there. So my photography really sort of moved again into sort of big landscapes and sky and water, just the power of nature. And I still absolutely love doing that sort of landscape photography.
Beautiful.
This image is called Under the Weather, and it was one of those incredible moments. I was actually walking around the Narrabeen Lakes with my husband, and I saw this black cloud. Literally, it was black. And I said, oh my gosh, we've got to get back to the car. I'm going to grab my camera, run down to Bradley's Head, which anybody who is a photographer in Sydney would know where Bradley's Head is, to capture this moment. And it was just, it was an incredible moment in time to capture that. And that image is quite special because it was, I guess I won second place in Ken Duncan, when I think he might have only done it for 1 year, but he had the real
Yeah.
landscape photography award. I can't really remember. I think he may have only done it for 1 or 2 years, but that was fun because I won my printer, which I'm still using. So thank you, Ken. Thanks for that.
Oh, brilliant.
Um,
I remember that
and
image
then
well. I remember that image well. It was a absolutely spectacular image. I think you put it in the AIPP 1 year as well, did you not?
I think I might have put one that was similar.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Into the AIPP. Yeah, that was. I mean, most people would know this pool who are in Sydney. This is a North Curl ocean pool. And if any of you have ever entered the Moran Prize, they're looking for things that really represent contemporary Australia.
Mm-hmm.
So this to me was perfect. It was actually a stitched image because I had this photo bit on the right and then bit on the left. But I just loved how, you had the 3 sort of teenagers, the big sign here that says pool is closed, dangerous conditions. And you've got the 3 teenagers in here just having fun. And then you've got these 2 tourists, one, she's got her phone above her head saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe it's so close. Help. Anyway, that to get those photos now, well, actually, you can't get that photo anymore because they've taken the sign down and put it at the top of, if you're coming down to the pool.
Okay.
Because they've got a gate there now because there's been there was a death shortly after that, actually.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, of kids doing exactly that, chain surfing.
Oh,
So
I never knew.
yeah. So it's a bit different now, but you can still go down there on a beautiful day.
Yeah, incredible storytelling and narrative in that image. Absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. No, I think that's why they accepted me into that prize. And the wonderful thing about the Moran Prize really is that if you're a finalist, they offer you an exhibition at Juniper Hall in Paddington. And I had so much fun preparing for that. So I had, I guess, if you've been to Juniper Hall, it's such a magnificent old heritage building with real high ceilings and beautiful place to exhibit. So this is just some of the work that I put into that. It was all about what I called city and surf. It was all
Hmm.
Sydney scenes. Yeah. And I was at that stage, I started to really explore long exposure photography. So you'll see, that a lot of these are actually long exposure, which I also really love, and we'll do more of that.
Yeah.
Um,
And what year was this, roughly? What year was that?
that was that exhibition was 2015.
Oh, there you go. So you were doing the
Yeah.
long exposure, black and white cityscape stuff before it was really, really cool.
Yeah,
Um,
no, I was doing it because I saw a few photographs. I know I listened to someone speaking. Who was it last week that you had? Anyway, you were talking about who inspired them with the long exposure, and my
yep.
inspiration it was Joel Chintalar. He's a
That's the
Dutch
one.
photographer.
That's the
Yeah,
one.
yeah. So
Yeah.
his black and white vision, I sort of, I think I bought his book and started following how he created some of his images, and he's a master at it. So, and I know there's some amazing photographers out there now doing this sort of stuff. I sort of, yeah, I threw this one in because it was a combination of surfing, long exposure, um, black and white that I love, but I love mostly the fact that it's my husband holding that surfboard. He's not a surfer, my son is, and those are his beautiful. He was my hand model.
Yep.
And I had to play around a bit with that just because it's really hard to hold a board still for that long to get that
Yeah.
exposure.
Yeah.
He did a pretty good job. So after the Juniper Hall exhibition, a friend of mine contacted me, someone I'd known from Indonesia days. How are we going for time, Adam?
Oh, yeah. Keep on going. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Plenty of time.
Anyway, and so she offered me an exhibition in Nashville. So this is one of the images that I created for that exhibition. And it was just such a hoot exhibiting there because it's such an interesting place, so different from the part of the States that I grew up in. But I thoroughly loved having that time. And these are just a few images. This is another one that I had in that exhibition. And all of these prints were large, so about over a meter by a meter, and limited edition prints. So this was 5 prints that I did for this exhibition. And I'll just explain this image because it's one of my all-time favorite images that I created. After my kids finished high school, we thought a family opportunity that I would love to have would be to take them back to South Africa, a place that was dear to my heart, and help them experience some of the wildlife there. So we went to Botswana, and my heart just thumped when I was looking at this incredible herd of elephants, and there was these 4 just like that. I mean, there was a lot of scrub around. There were more elephants and more bush in the background, but these 4 right here were just like that. And I thought, that's me and my babies,
Yeah.
So it's a really emotive work for me. And then there was this big fella in the back that I brought forward, which I think is probably pretty typical of elephant behavior. They're not the males aren't always right next to the little ones.
Yeah.
But that's the story behind that image.
It's beautiful. I remember when, now that I think about it, you've transitioned through a number of different styles, and I remember this particular series of wildlife images really, really well. And I think the next one you're about to show us might have even did it get a gold at? Did that get a gold at the APA Awards, the Australian Photography Awards?
Yeah, I think it may have. Those 2 did pretty well in those awards. Yeah. But somehow, Adam, I think I remember yours might have done better.
I don't know about that. I don't know. I might have got lucky with one time. I'm not sure, but yeah, it's funny when you
Yeah.
enter these awards because you kind of know to a certain degree who to keep an eye on and who's doing well, and you try and pick out different photographers' entries as you watch the viewing live. And actual fact, I remember this one, and I think I was there live this year, and this is just phenomenal. Just so much going on. And did this got gold distinction? Did it not? I think it was certainly
Yeah, it
very
did.
high. Yeah.
It was the highest scoring print. And it was one of those. That's another. That was the same trip to Africa with kids. And it was one of those wildlife moments that just I couldn't believe I was experiencing. There were literally that's the Quelea bird migration in Southern Africa. Can you hear me? It's raining so hard. Can
Oh
you hear
no,
me?
it's fine. It's fine. I think actually, I think Zoom is just taking the rain out of that, which is making your voice a little bit wavy. But continue on. It's fine.
Okay. Anyway, it was, you know, literally millions of birds flying in every which way, and it was a really special moment. And I just love the fact that you could see these little red beaks on every single one of them.
Oh, it's
So
amazing.
that was special. Yeah, very special. And then, so moving on from that exhibition in Nashville, I met a woman at that exhibition, Rosemary's, and Rosemary's part of the Michelini family from Tabasco. And she said, you know, I would really love for you to come behind the scenes to Avery Island, where Tabasco is made, and take some photographs of our incredible live oak trees. So that was another one of those experiences that was just really special. So I went with Jeanette, the woman from Nashville, and Rosemary. We went down to Avery Island outside of in Louisiana, and we spent the day, actually a few days, taking photographs of these trees. And these two images here I've just thrown in, but there were a lot of photographs, but they're all stitched because she wanted something that was going to be very, very large.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, they're like 8 to 10 photographs. Apart from the compositing, the actual tree is like 8 to 10 photographs that I stitched together. In the end, she wanted something more, something that was a little bit different. She wanted to add a lot of color. She wanted to match sort of a teal and a gold to go. And this has been printed, I think 12 feet wide, something like that, in her living room under acrylic. So it's got a big acrylic face mount. So it looks like it's under glass. But that was a fantastic opportunity as well. And I think that's what happens when you start to put yourself out there.
Yeah.
New opportunities start to emerge, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of audience questions here on previous images I'll just throw at you. Steph has asked, how long was you probably won't remember, but how long roughly was the exposure on that surfboard with your husband holding?
Yeah, that was a long exposure. That was actually about, from memory, it was about 3.5 or 4 minutes.
Wow, super long.
Super long.
Yeah, super long.
Yeah.
Malin asks just, what was the
with a neutral density filter, with a neutral density, just so that she understands that. Yeah.
Ah, gotcha. With an ND filter. Malin just asks, what was Joel's surname? Is Tintager or?
Oh, it's Chintalar. It's TJINTELAAR.
Perfect. We can Google that. Very, very well-known black and white photographer Joel isn't he? I mean, he is almost
very well known.
He is almost, I suppose, the godfather of that particular urban style.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's brilliant.
There was one other one that I'll just put to you now. Sandra asks, what is Pamela's definition? Sorry. Pamela's definition of what is illustrative photography from her perspective. So I guess, what do you feel like illustrative photography means from your perspective?
Well, thank you, Sandra, for that question. It's very interesting for me personally. Illustrative photography is 100% photographic. So because I've sort of come through the AIPP, where everything is meant to be photographic, that's sort of how I keep my images. So I will composite, which you'll see later in the presentation, a lot of photographs. But that I consider them illustrative because they're not just one scene. So I think, and I often add my own sort of story to the background. So that picture of the elephants is illustrative. It's 100% photography. Even the texture that you see in it was the stand that I was standing on when I took the photographs. So it's all part of for those, it's part of the moment, but I've created an image. So I think there's a bit of context. It's sort of, so illustrative to me is a bit contextual, I guess, but purely photographic. So I don't change things dramatically in Photoshop. I do a lot of layering of different images. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, yeah. There was one other question as well. The black and whites, were they shot in infrared, or I think in reference to the previous images?
Yeah, yeah. I've never, I haven't yet explored infrared, which one's back there, photography. It's all been shot in color,
Okay,
and then I suppose that's how most people doing black and whites would do it. And then I edit them in Photoshop
okay,
to desaturate them. Yeah.
beautiful.
Okay. So moving on, this is another image I thought I'd throw in there because that's a snowy image, but it's from Australia. So that was in Parrish, I believe, down in the mountains. We were staying at a lodge in Thredbo, and the guy who runs the lodge recognized that I loved to snowshoe, and he said, "I'll take you out. I think we can find some brumbies." So he obviously is a local, and he knew where they were hanging out. So I spent a couple of days photographing the brumbies out there, and it was a really magical moment. I know that they're not native to Australia, and it's very controversial, the brumbies and what they can do to the landscape, but they are absolutely stunning to watch. So that's a recognizable image. I think I was, again, third place in the head-on landscape prize for that one.
Yeah, beautiful image. I remember this one well.
This one?
Yeah, the Brumby. I remember when you
Oh, yeah.
posted that, and I just remember thinking this is going to be a real wow image across the competitions. I mean, I know you don't take images particularly for those competitions, but yeah, that one did pretty well, I remember.
Yeah, competitions are interesting. I think there's a lot to be learned from them, but they're not the be all and end all. And I
Yeah,
think over time you learn to really shoot mostly for yourself. I think it's good to enter competitions because you get a much better understanding of how your images stack up to what everyone else is doing. At the same time, photography is very subjective.
yeah,
So, there's no photography. I mean, I believe there's no one right way. I mean, there's so many different ways to create, and I think you and I are sort of on the same wavelength there, Adam. You
absolutely,
know,
absolutely.
there's a lot of different ways to take photography. So this is just another one, composites with featuring the little tawny frog mouths that I just think are stunning birds. And I've spent a bit of time in the bush photographing them. Which brings me to sort of uh, a new direction or an enhanced direction for my work. So I guess in 2018, my dad passed away. And, for anybody who's lost a parent, it's pretty dramatic, very, very sad. But the morning that I got the phone call from my mom, my husband and I went for a walk, and it was a beautiful walk on the northern beaches, and I was just planning my trip back to the States, and suddenly we were just surrounded by lorikeets, the stunning lorikeet bird, and it was an amazing experience because we all have bird experiences, but this one moved me so much. I thought, oh my gosh, that is incredible. I'm not a wacky bird person. I'm not really that wacky, but I thought that's my dad. That's my dad saying hello. So I said
Absolutely,
that to my,
absolutely.
yeah. And I said to my husband, Greg, that's dad. And he's like, what, where, what? Well, anyway, he didn't get it, but it was a real sign to me about how connected we all are. And in that experience, my dad, the last time he visited Australia from the States with my mom, he was bit by a lorikeet on the finger,
Ah,
and it hurt. I know. And I thought, and it's been a running joke, like who gets bit by a lorikeet? But my dad had this ability to be bit by the oddest of animals. So it was just his sign and his sense of humor that was coming out. And I thought, isn't that amazing?
yeah,
That's how connected the universe is. So it was a beautiful moment. So I started to just really take note of absolutely everything in my surroundings. So, I do a lot of bushwalking. And so I, would take my camera and I would photograph everything that moved me on the day. So I created this composite for my dad. So that was the beginning. And it's called I'll Fly Away. That was the beginning of these really super heavily composited images of nature. Um,
beautiful, really beautiful. Hey, tell me a little. I mean, a little bit about this series. Do you feel when I see this, I just feel like this is so authentically something that you've been working towards? I mean, that's what my intuition is telling me. Is there something within you as an artist that just feels so at home and so content with this body of work?
You know, it's so interesting, Adam. I absolutely, you're absolutely right. It's been 100% organic and something that, and that's been my life of photography. It's sort of moments in my life move me to go into a certain direction. And I feel like with this Australian native flora and fauna stuff, it's just organic. It's a natural process, and I don't spend a lot of time looking at other people's work. It's most of it just simply comes from within. I spend a lot of time on my work. I mean, I'm a full-time photographer, but a lot of it's spent in my mind. So yes, it's been completely organic, and I absolutely love it. And I know that there's a lot of other types of photography that I will do, but I feel there's such a natural fit with the Australian. And I think it's partly, I write about this somewhere. I remember my mom saying, you know, grow where you're planted. And to me, that was sort of make the most of wherever you are.
Yeah.
And I'm here, and I love it. And this is my life. So this series is actually called Grow Where You're Planted. And I'm really enjoying it. Yeah.
Yeah, I can tell the work is incredible. It's absolutely spectacular, and
Well,
also very unique as well. Like I haven't seen this style of work presented in this manner before. Beautiful.
no, I haven't either. I started to see a few things pop up now.
Yeah, I have too. In fact, yeah.
Which is funny, but that's I guess that you can that's flattery, I suppose.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, and so this is part of that series, Grow Where You're Planted, and it's all native Australian work. And this was the portfolio that Adam mentioned earlier, won the illustrative category of the AIPP Awards last year for New South Wales. And I go on to talk about a couple of these images and how they were created, because I know some of the people watching might be curious. But this is a photograph of obviously a couple of brogas, which are such an incredible looking bird, and they actually are vulnerable in New South Wales. So that's a bit sad. But I took those, I actually took this photograph out at the Featherdale Wildlife Park, and you can see I extracted everything that was in the background, which I do a lot of. I do a lot more extracting than I do, and then recreating images. That's sort of how I work right now. But this is how I ended up creating this one here. So it's actually just the picture of two birds in a repeat pattern that I thought worked out beautifully. I just love the effect. I think because of the black and white, and there's just a tiny bit of red in there.
Yeah.
And then this one, which I call Flannel Fairies, I'm absolutely mesmerized by flannel flowers. I think they're so stunning, and there's a lot of them on the northern beaches. So when I'm hiking, I sort of come across them a lot. But these ones had actually come to the end of their life, and I actually love flowers that are mature, because they just add this other beauty, kind of like all of us women out there. They mature as they age. So I put this together from, I think, 5 images. So I'll show the images that I used. So this one, I just thought, well, I mean, seriously, anybody looking at that would think that was a fairy. Wouldn't you, Adam?
Absolutely. I can see it. I can see it.
You can see the fairy. You can see the torch. Oh, look at the bonnet.
Yeah.
So those were the 6 images that I used to create that. So this was, I used the light from this image to create the light coming from the torch.
Yeah, sure. And the black frame, was that was part of the image as well, was it, or?
Yeah. So yes, that was actually just a photograph of this black sort of felt that I use at the back of some of my photographs when I'm taking them.
Okay.
So I took a photograph of that by itself, because you can't actually add any of your own backgrounds.
Yep.
So I use that, and then I had photographed them on top of black as well, but to be safe, yeah. These are paper daisies that are also mature, and I still have some sitting on my desk. I think I just love the way they sort of fold over on themselves as they get older, and they just take on this incredible maturity. And I just threw this one in. So you'll notice a lot of my work that the birds are not really in proportion to the tree, but that's what makes it more interesting. You can actually focus on the subject. But yes, there's nothing about this image apart from every single photograph that went into it. It's a composite.
Yeah, I find that interesting actually, and I see a lot of other illustrative photographers do the same thing. And coming from landscape background myself, when I'm compositing, I'm really finicky about getting everything so it looks like it's a single shot. But in actual fact, as you said, this is kind of part of the narrative, isn't it? That it's quite obviously not a single shot.
Yeah, yeah. I sometimes it's easier just to make that clear.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's definitely not a single shot.
yeah.
But I do know what you mean,
But
especially if you're creating photographs for a landscape, trying to market it as a landscape photo, that
yeah,
you want it to be as realistic as possible.
yeah, trying to fool the judges. No, but the
Yeah,
this style has a nice kind of whimsy, lightness to it when you create it in this sort of manner, I think as well, which is really nice.
yeah, yeah. I wanted to show a bit of communication between the birds because the kookaburras make so much noise, and
They
and
do.
that's what I was trying to portray, just
Yeah,
that communication in the bush. Um, so from there, I sort of started to work on. I just had in my mind this sort of tapestry of nature, and again, how we're all so connected. Uh, and I started working on this image, and it literally, Adam, came just out of my heart, kind of like all of my art.
yeah,
Started putting together these beautiful Australian specimens, and the birds and cockatoos. We have so many of them around. And I created this called Entwined, and it's just a photographic tapestry of my natural environment where I'm living right now. I think
mm,
um, it was also the beginning of a whole new sort of series that I'm doing, because after I did that, and it hadn't really even occurred to me when I was creating this, but I had a couple of interior designers say to me, that really needs to be wallpaper. You need to have that as a surface pattern. It could be on a cushion, a bedspread. And, I hadn't really even thought about that, but as it turns out, it does make a lot of sense. And so I started really focusing on patterns. So actually, I love patterns in nature. Well, these are now patterns of nature.
yeah.
Um, so that's called Entwined, and is one of my favorite sort of creations.
It's got a beautiful unison and simplicity, and I imagine it must have been incredibly challenging to get it to come together in such a way that it has that cohesion and pattern. And yeah, tell us a little bit about the creation and how long and toing and froing and back and forth it took to put that together. You might tell me now it took you an afternoon, but
I wish I could tell you that. No, these artworks are, they're absolutely uh, I do it for the love of it.
yeah,
So, I mean, how long did it take to create this? Well, apart from actually photographing every element, then it's the extracting all of what you want to see
mm,
in the. So every single little bit of it is a photograph that's been taken. Then I have to get rid of all the background. Um, so, I mean, I hate to even say, but probably, this one probably took me about 60 hours to
yeah,
create.
yeah,
Um, but it's a labor of love. I find it very meditative, and I get a thrill when something looks just right to me.
yeah.
Um, and I guess with artwork, you're never quite sure when you're done. But sometimes you kind of think, "Yep, that's it. I can't do anything else that'll make it any better or any different." Uh,
Absolutely.
it was funny. I had someone who was looking at one that's very similar to this, and she said, "I just love it, but do you think you could get rid of that lizard? Because some people, when they're looking at these things, I mean, lizards and spiders and snakes, Australia has a reputation, and they're kind of like, don't like the lizard." And I sort of thought, actually, the lizard is what makes it for me. But yeah,
Absolutely.
so that one took a while to create.
And I think I
Uh,
think I think for those that are interested in doing something a bit different, a bit unique, of course, it comes from vision and your own, your own heart and creative soul, but sometimes it just can be like purely some hours of just playing and getting that to come together. I mean, the old master artists of the past spent, hours and hours and months creating their masterpieces, much like you have here. And sometimes it can just be that sheer investment of time, can't it, in a work that can really get it to the finish point.
Yeah, and sometimes you'll spend, an enormous amount of time and energy on something, and in the end, not be so happy with it.
Yeah,
That's happened too. But,
yeah,
but to me, that's all part of it's all part of the process.
yeah,
You're not happy with the work, and so I'm pleased when I finally feel like I'm done with something and I really love it.
absolutely.
But that's, I guess, that this is perfect time to throw this in. And I apologize if my mom is watching, because I know she hates that swearing. I didn't create this slide, Mom, but I did go to a creative workshop for it was learning how to write properly for grants, because with some of the work that I'm doing now, I'm hoping to find some sort of support and funding, because as we've discussed before, Adam, it's there's a huge cash outlay when you're trying to put together an exhibition.
Yes.
So I went to a workshop on writing grants, and I thought this really, really resonated with me. The creative process. You've got this idea, it's just brilliant. You love it, and you start working on it, and you think, oh, that's not as easy as I thought. What if I try this? And then it gets really hard, and nothing works, and your computer crashes, and then you think, shoot, why am I doing this? What am I doing? I just go get a real job. And then things start to sort of look up, and then you get to the top again, and it's like, this is awesome. I absolutely love this. And that's where I spend most of my time. But I thought it was a really interesting sort of suggestion on the creative mind.
Yeah, I tell a similar story at a lot of my workshops, that I suffer from the same, and I think many do. But the benefit that I think comes from this is, when we're right at the top, we have the confidence to say yes to things that maybe we wouldn't normally say yes to, and get involved
But
in.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then when we're at the bottom, it's kind of a good time to self-improve and lift yourself, back out of that slump, and start chasing those highs again.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's a process.
Yeah.
And exactly what you've just said, Adam. This is one of my favorite expressions. It's that courage that sets confidence in motion. So when you're at the top, you've got the courage to do things that you might not otherwise
Yeah.
have done. So I took a big step when I started thinking about this wallpaper, and I started looking into other surface designs that were out there, and I thought, wow, there must be a market for really high quality visual wallpaper that's not so pixelated. Because you look at some of the stuff and you get up close and it just looks terrible. And as a photographer, you sort of think, oh, surely there's got to be some more interesting stuff out there. So I did go on this journey of looking into surface design. And I love this expression by Maya Angelou. You can't use up your creativity. And I so feel that way. The more you use, the more you have.
Yeah.
And that's just, I think any creative has that same feeling.
Yeah.
So this is the courage I'm talking about. I decided, I'm just going to throw myself out there and go to Denfair, which is a big interior design fair in Melbourne. And so I booked a space. They chase you for that. And then I got it all set up, and I went down there with one big sort of surface design, a wallpaper on the wall of my Flannel Flowers, and a few other just native artworks that I had. And I sat there for 4 days talking to people about this wallpaper line that I was launching. So this was a little bit premature. I wasn't really launching it. I was trying to launch it. I think you have to do that. And there was quite a lot of interest, because they, like me, they hadn't seen the definition for made very large that way. Because each of the photographs in these large scale artworks, there's a lot of individual photos that are taken like this with a macro lens. So the details, it's really fine detail. So you can blow them up, and they're huge, huge files, which has been a bit of a problem sometimes. Massive. So this one is created in 375 centimeters by 300 centimeters. And it's a repeat pattern. So you could put that all over, the ground floor of a elderly person's home or something, repeated. So I've really loved getting into that sort of
Wow.
yeah, surface design. So this is another one of those flannel flowers, and they come up absolutely beautiful on the wall. Really, somebody said to me that looks like what's that crazy musical Little House of Horrors, you know, where the plants come alive. I thought,
Yeah.
oh, that wasn't my intention,
No, not at
but
all. I think it's beautiful.
yeah. Um, so this one's called Floral Forest, and it's along a similar vein, but it incorporates more of the flowers that I'm using.
Mm.
Um, that's just called Flannel Flowers. I just threw a couple of these in. So then, yes, I became obsessed with creating patterns, and I think maybe that's my computer science. Maybe it's the fact that my dad was a mathematics professor, because there's a lot of sort of you have to understand a little bit about math to create
Mm.
these repeatable designs. So every corner, every edge has to match perfectly, and that's been such an incredibly time-consuming challenge with this work. And the
Yeah.
number of times the amount of energy I put in to try to make it all match properly. But I think I have a method, and I'm loving it.
It's incredible. And any influence from Escher, the likes of Escher in this, in the
Oh,
repeatable?
I love Escher. One of my brothers loved Escher, and he actually had a poster of Escher on his wall when we were young. And I loved his work, and I've always looked at him and thought, how on earth did he do that? So probably not so much
Yeah.
Escher, probably more William Morris. You know, he who was the arts and crafts sort of innovator and did incredible work. I think he's probably had an influence on me. Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, a lot of people do influence your work. You sort of, if I love it, and I'm moved by it, I would say that influenced me. But I'm actually influenced by so much more than
Mm.
just artwork. I think for me, I have a real musical background. I was a real muso when I was young. Um, and more recently, I've sung for the last 10 years. I've taken a break now with a group called Soul Food, but I am so moved by music, and certain music in particular. My husband and I always go to what's called WOMAD, World Music Festival in Adelaide. We try to go most years, and we actually made it in this year just before the whole COVID thing happened. Um, and I was incredibly moved. In fact, a lot of this work, I've been listening to this artist called, oh gosh, how do you pronounce it? Sekou Keita. He plays the kora, which is an instrument from Mali. Um, and it actually moves me to the core. I feel the insides of my body. It's incredible. And he plays along with a harpist called Katrin French. So I would say a lot of my inspiration comes from things outside of photography and even art. I'm inspired by the clouds. I'm inspired by kindness, things
Beautiful.
like that just move you to the core. You think, oh,
Yeah.
and it actually inspires you to create. That's how my inspiration flows. Um, yeah, I don't know how we got on that, Adam. Just a bit.
No, it was a nice side note. It's great to hear some background and how ideas are born and where they come from. And yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So this is just an up close crop of one of those surface designs. And talk about time consuming. This is probably my most time consuming piece, because I was trying to, everything is photographed, everything is, I've done a bit of warping, but apart from that, these are the images that I've found. Um, and so that's an up close crop. You can see it's complicated.
It works beautifully as a standalone image with that beautiful circle in the middle there. Yeah,
Yeah, well,
gorgeous.
I actually do. This is uh, not the repeated part, but
Yeah,
the center of this image is one of my artworks in the new series that I'll talk about here in a second.
yeah.
Uh,
Um,
but that just shows what it's like as that's the repeat pattern, and then
Gotcha,
when it's repeated, that's what it looks like.
gotcha.
Um,
Quick question, or a couple of questions, I think. Well, there's one. Malin asks, what camera are you using? I assume you could almost use any camera, available these days to do similar style. But what camera are you using, Pamela?
yeah, no, I'm a Canon girl. I use a
Canon. Yep.
5D Mark IV that I absolutely love, and I have several different lenses. I use a macro lens a lot for this work
Okay.
because it's so detailed from a distance. I mean, some of them up close, you'll have, a lot of blurry areas. But yeah, my 5D Mark IV is I just love it. Just love it.
Beautiful.
And for this sort of work, I sometimes sort of think about a phase one and some of these incredible, very, very high resolution cameras, and maybe at some point I'll
Yeah.
need them. But for this sort of work, I don't need any more megapixels because it's pretty big as it is
Yeah.
to use on my computer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this just shows that particular artwork in the various colorways
Interesting.
for surface design. So which has been a whole process. So everything in there is actually a PNG file. If you're a photographer, you know what those are. And then I changed the backgrounds to create those different ones.
Sure.
So yeah, it's fun. So throughout this whole process, and what I was sort of hoping to do, I'm now collaborating with a boutique surface design company here in Sydney, and they're working on my stuff right now, and there should be a launch soon. But I've got, I guess, 16 different patterns, and so many different colorways. So it's been a really long process, and I have thoroughly enjoyed it. It'll be interesting to see what comes of it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different streams in photography. So this is one that I'm working on right now. Which brings me to my, passion project. So that's what I like to call it. For the past over a year, I've been sort of really focused on, the beautiful native flora and fauna, particularly flora in Australia that's endangered to extinction. Because it's real, and I'm concerned. And I read an article about a plant that had come back. They thought it was extinct, and it had come back, and it really, piqued my interest. So I spent a lot of time trying to get a hold of the right people, and finally I did. And I was really fortunate that the Australian Botanical Gardens Plant Bank welcomed me into their plant bank to photograph all these species. A lot of them are, if they're not endangered yet, they think they're in that direction. A lot of them are vulnerable. And they've got they do incredible work. This is out at Mount Annan, near Cumberland, Campbelltown. And so last year, every Wednesday, I would go out and I'd photograph just different endangered species or vulnerable species. And I'd take, like you can see this little black thing here. I'd take a white black drop or a black backdrop. And I had some real challenges because there was always wind. It's all outside. It's all in situ. So trying to get the image that I wanted to was harder than I expected. But it's been a wonderful process, and that's what I'm using, are all of these images to create my current body of work of endangered ecological communities and flora and fauna in Australia. So this first picture, that's the plant bank at Mount Annan. I then, with the same thing in mind, went out to Perth and photographed their incredible conservation garden there. I was introduced to one of the horticulturists because Western Australia has an enormous amount of vulnerable species due to a variety of reasons, including, loss of habitat, mining, and that sort of thing. So, and then this one was when I went down to South Australia, went to WOMAD, but also went to the conservation garden there at the Botanical Gardens and took a lot of photographs. I just threw this in there because I thought it was really interesting that even David Attenborough recognizes what we're losing here. I'm not even him of all people, but what we have to lose here in Australia. And he wrote this, and he says, from the Cumberland Plain woodland, which is actually one of those ecological communities that's at risk just in Western Sydney, to the Amazon rainforest, plants play a vital role in stabilizing the Earth's atmosphere, environment, and climate. The fact is that no species has ever had such wholesale control over everything on Earth, living or dead, as we now have. In our hands now lies not only our future, but that of other living creatures with whom we share the Earth. And I thought that really moved me, and that's actually on a plant. I mean, it's not on a plant. It's on a plaque at the plant bank. And I thought, yeah, we do have so much to lose. And so these artworks that I'm creating I'm just trying to draw some real attention to what's at risk. Because I think a lot of people don't know. And I thought by creating artworks, that's sort of an easy way to introduce a subject.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is one of those species. It's you might know this one. It's called the fringe lily, but I'm going to see if So that was just a little short time lapse that I did of the fringe lily. And that particular fringe lily, you might wonder where I got that, but it was given to me. Um, oops, I'll just go back. Yeah, it was given to me by the plant bank in a little tiny, plant holder. And I took it home. She said, I said to her, gosh, I'd love to do a time lapse of that beautiful plant, because that plant blooms one day once in its life, and that's it.
Oh, wow.
And I thought that was so incredibly mesmerizing. So I said, oh, can I please do a time lapse, and I'll bring it back to you. So I did that time lapse, with a few mistakes along the way, but I got it. And I just thought, isn't that incredible that one flower blooms once for 24 hours and that's it?
It is
You know,
incredible.
I just thought, but those plants are at risk. So that's why I took that. Part of this passion project, when I went out to Perth, I went to visit the Carrick Black Cockatoo Rehabilitation Center, which again is one of the most moving experiences I've had as a photographer, because this cockatoo named Randy would not leave my shoulder. He just he spent the whole 2 hours I was in that sort of enclosure with me, helping me. He was a great helper with my, everything I did. And it was almost like this little human was sitting on my shoulder telling me what to do. Not really, it was better than human. It was just a wonderful experience. And I just think they're doing incredible work, some of these conservation groups. And that's one that I would highly support. So I've put together quite a few images of the black cockatoos from my time there that I just, I smile every time I look at them.
They're beautiful. I think they might be my favorite bird too. They remind me of traveling through Australia, because you just, every now and then you'll see a little pocket of them, a little,
Yeah.
few of them fly across, and they sort of swim through the sky, don't they? They're so graceful the way that they move through the air.
They're so graceful, so beautiful. And I just always feel so honored when I see one in the wild. I really do, because they are actually endangered in a lot of parts of Australia.
Beautiful.
This is a Carnaby's cockatoo, which has a white tail, and they're also incredibly beautiful, also endangered. And it's funny, this is a composite, obviously. I mean, to me, that's quite obvious. And I got a note on Instagram from a photographer saying, as a photographer, I'm confused by this image. Is it a composite? And I went back and said, yes. That's what I do. I'm not pretending that it's not. But I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
Because I actually like the mystery of compositing, taking real stuff that's live, and creating this atmosphere around it. I love doing that. So I think that's kind of clear, isn't it?
Often as composite artists like myself as well, we often get a little bit of flack from other photographers saying, oh, you need to, divulge all of the details and tell us that it's a composite. But I'm of the belief that sort of takes away some of the romanticism and some of the feeling and the emotion that I'm trying to create. Nothing takes away feeling and emotion and romanticism like details, as far as I'm concerned. Where do you stand there?
Oh, I agree completely. And I feel like, I want my artwork to really be visceral, to be something that you feel. And I don't lie. If someone asks me, is that a composite? Of course I will. Yes. I tell the truth, but I don't write a big, long, monologue about what camera I used, what lens I used, what the focal length was, because that's not what this is about. It's not a technical shot. It's a creative, imagery, but it's all real and it's all photographic.
Absolutely.
So that's what I love about what we do. So when we had the bushfires, I was actually in the States, as I said earlier, and just so devastated by it all. And I thought, what can I do to help? So I put together this little image, and these were all just photographs that I'd taken in Western Australia at the time. And I put it together and I put it on Instagram and said, I started with 5, but went to 10 people who can show me a new receipt of a donation you've made to, a few of these charities. I will send you this print.
Wow.
And it was wonderful because we earned about $4,000 towards the cause, which, I think just every little bit counts. So I was pleased. I was really pleased with what people were willing to do. So I took this in South Australia as well. These are the orange-bellied parrots, which are also highly endangered. They think that there might be, only 50 left in the wild. So that was taken actually Where do you think that was taken? Well, not the wilds. It was taken at the Adelaide Zoo, and composited. There actually was almost black background, and they were all on these branches, but I put them together.
Yeah.
Which brings me to, you know, what I'm working on, which is this body of work called Bush Tapestries Hanging by a Thread, that I'm hoping to exhibit later in the year. I've had a few, like everybody who's living through this isolation, there's been a few changes in my plans. I had a trip planned to Tasmania to do some photography down there. I'm trying to create at least one artwork of each of the states in Australia of their particular endangered or vulnerable species. So I'm about 4 artworks in, and I probably will have about 12 at the end for this exhibition. So the plant bank has offered me an exhibition, so I'm working towards that. We just don't know when it's going to be. And I'm also talking to people at Taronga. So there's a few things in the works, which I'm excited about. And this isolation time has given me, you know, I have plenty to work on.
Yeah.
So this is an artwork created entirely of endangered species. And you know, 70% of Australia's endangered species are actually plants. And none of us, animals or humans, will survive without the plants. That's why I've wanted to sort of draw attention to that. Our fauna get a lot of media attention, and they should, because they're incredible. But the flora you often don't hear about. So that's why I thought, you know, if I can combine the two, co-opt them into artworks that create this visual, you know, people might start to really think about it. So that's what these are all about. So this particular artwork is the one that's in the Ravenswood Women's Art Prize, and it's big. It's about 40 inches by 60 inches. So it's a big piece. Sitting on my computer right now, it's at 18 gigabytes. It's got 56 different endangered or vulnerable little, you know, flora and fauna in there, with 113 layers. I've got 11 birds, 35 plants, and then I've got in the corner here, I've got 2 tiny little corroboree frogs, which
there they are. I was wondering where they are.
Yeah, you can hardly see them. But yeah, I took those frogs at Taronga Zoo. And I tried to find those, but there's less than 100 of those frogs left in the wild. So I was out at Threadbow, you know, walking through the marsh trying to find them, but no luck. Anyway. Yeah. So for this artwork, I actually put together, and the colors didn't come out that great, but it's one of those time lapses that I've done to show you. It's literally 30 seconds or something, how the process sort of works for me. This is something I've learned in isolation times. I've learned how to sort of do one of these timelines of your layers. It's so much fun.
It is. It's incredible to watch. Do you generally create the background first? Is that sort of the process?
Yeah, it is actually. I sort of knew that I wanted the birds to be the feature. There's a lot of birds in there. But I was trying to, I wanted the water and I wanted the sky. And some of these plants are actually tiny. They're actually tiny. They're part, you know, they represent the understory of the ecological community. So, you know, like these ones, oops, I'll go back, right here, are quite small, but I enlarged them. I thought they looked amazing over that water. So none of this is true to scale, none of this image. But that's art, isn't it? You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then other pieces in this same series, this one called The Last Cacophony. And I had one of my brothers said, "Gosh, that's our family. You know, there's six kids and our parents." And I thought, yeah, and the world, and that makes sense. It's allegorical in a sense.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
So that's what I meant. All of these. So that first artwork, everything was sort of Australia-wide. That, you know, they're vulnerable in somewhere in Australia, whereas this one is strictly Western Australia. And so, like I said, I'm trying to do one for each of the states, and I'm working on them. This one is also Western Australia. Everything in there is, and that's the one I talked about that I've also created the repeat pattern of. Mm. But those are all the Carnaby cockatoo and all the plants in Western Australia, that, not all of them, but some of them that are endangered.
Spectacular. Just gorgeous.
Yeah, I'm really happy with that. That's probably the most time-consuming piece, to be honest, Adam, that I've ever created. This one right here, just to get it the way I wanted it.
I love what
Because every, yeah.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
I just love what you've done with the background there, how we can sort of see a sense of depth as we look back into the trees that are further away, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's been really, really fun. This is one of New South Wales. It probably won't be the one that I exhibit in the end, but again, it was one of those patterns that I enjoyed creating. I'm not, apart from that one that you saw earlier of the Brogas, which is a real sort of mandala, I don't really like my patterns to be exactly the same on one side and the other. You know, so a lot of William Morris, surface designer, a lot of his are repeated, you know, like that, which I think is, but they're beautiful, but it's not the way I create my art. It needs to be, can't just be a mirror image.
Yeah.
Yeah. So everything in this is vulnerable or endangered from New South Wales. And I just thought some of those little tiny flowers are the most beautiful things.
Yeah, aren't they just?
Yeah. And then, you know, I still do the odd workshop from home. You know, I sort of prefer with my workshops that a group of people that are at a similar level in understanding get in touch with me and say, you know, I've got this group of friends that would like to do a workshop. That's the easiest way. Sometimes I find, and you would too, Adam, with you, I'm sure that the levels of skill are so varied naturally.
Yeah.
Sometimes in a workshop it can be a little bit tricky. So I'm sort of leaning that direction where I really would love, if anybody's interested in learning how to composite or more about this sort of photography, get in touch with me with a group of friends, and I'll do a private workshop. I love doing that. In my studio, we've got a space specifically for that.
Yeah.
So just if you're looking.
Are you able to do Zoom, Skype / workshops, online workshops at the moment, Pamela, or is?
You know, I probably could. I haven't actually. I just yesterday actually on my website put up a link saying if you're interested in a Zoom private session, let me know. I haven't really put together a workshop online yet. I haven't. I've been sort of busy working on what I'm working on and haven't invested, but I might need to, because who knows what's around the corner.
Yeah. Just while we're on that, what's your website so people can come over there and click on the contact page and email you if they're interested?
Yes, my website. Well, I've got it here at the end. Is oops, where did I put it? Okay. If you want to have a look at that, it's PamelaPauline.com.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, that's my website. And
we also have those in the description, the website, the Instagram, and the Facebook. So make sure you jump over there and follow those. But if you are interested in a workshop, then jump over on the website there and contact Pamela. And
Yeah, and just from there, I just sort of finish off this little presentation saying I'm still documenting life. I'm a little bit more sophisticated now. Everything has moved, like most of you probably, to sort of digital presentation in book form. And I'm still photographing my children, much to their dismay, but you know, they're the best. And I've just, you know, this image is just called Hope, and it really just represents hope for, you know, everything that, you know, our world and what's going through right now. So I thought I'd just throw that in. That's all. Those are all just native Australian species, and so beautiful.
Absolutely gorgeous.
And this is I'm ending with this quote because, you know, anybody who follows any sort of sport would know that we lost Kobe Bryant earlier in the year, and I was listening to I'm not a huge basketball fan, I do like it, but I was listening to an interview by his photographer, and his photographer said that Kobe had said this to him, and I thought that's exactly how I feel. If you aren't completely obsessed with what you do, then we don't speak the same language. So it was Kobe Bryant obsessed with basketball talking to his photographer, and I thought, yeah, that resonates.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's really brings me to the end of the presentation, Adam.
Oh, thank you so much. That was amazing. I've just loved it. I'm completely in love with your new work. It's just absolutely beautiful. One question that came up in my mind as we were going through that, I wonder how much, and I suppose that last quote kind of references that as well, but how much do you need a personal connection or a personal story to inspire you to, you know, get down and be creative and invest at that time? Is that critical? Is that
absolutely critical in my work? I think that's why I took you through my whole life journey, because it's all, I think my work has just followed my heart, and so if my heart's not in it, I mean, we all do work that sort of pays the bills as well. And it's not that my heart's not in that, but for this passion stuff, I have to really feel it to enjoy the time that I'm putting into it.
Yeah, yeah, I'm much of the same. And particularly when we're spending such a huge chunk of our creative time, you know, on these projects, I think it really needs to be something that we enjoy and we're passionate
Yeah.
about at the same time. Absolutely. I'll just check for questions here quickly. There's a lot of people saying thank you, thank you, thank you. Guys, if you have any last questions, pop them over there and I'll pass them on. One thing I did notice when I was having a look at your website yesterday, you have a sale on some of your prints. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I'm sure there's other people that have fallen in love with your work and would love to have one hanging on their wall.
Oh, yes, thanks, Adam. Yeah, well, I sort of, with this new work coming through, I thought I need to clear some space. So to be honest, a lot of that is, well, almost everything that you see that's on sale there is stuff that's hanging in my studio and it's ready to go.
Yep.
Most of it's from the Grow Where You're Planted series. And yes, I'm offering it, you know, at a much reduced rate, just so that I can, you know, create more space for new things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And your work is limited edition too, is it not?
Yeah, those smaller prints are all limited edition of 20. The bigger things are usually limited edition of 5 or 7, depending on the series. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So visit my website, send me a note. It's been a real pleasure, Adam, being able to chat with you this morning. I've really enjoyed it.
Oh, I loved it. Absolutely. My pleasure. Thanks for joining us. Here we go. Oh, Leslie asks, do you have a plan for your composites or do they evolve more naturally? So do you have a vision in the beginning? Um,
You know, it's a combination of both. Sometimes I really do have an idea of what I'd like to create. It doesn't always work out that way for various reasons. It doesn't quite work. And I'm very visual, and sometimes the plans are too, yeah, I don't have the right material for it. But a
yeah,
lot of it does evolve. A lot of it evolves, you know, as I'm working. It's like I use my mouse as a paintbrush, and I
yeah,
sort of go wherever it needs to go. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. All right, doesn't look like we have any more questions. So once again, on behalf of the audience that's all saying thank you, thank you, thank you. They've absolutely loved it. I've loved it. You're one of my favorite artists anyway. I mentioned that in the beginning.
Thank
And
you so much.
you know, I just love the fact that you've found this work that you're so passionate about, and it's so important as well. It's particularly important, and I think it's really needed, and it's beautiful, absolutely stunning, and I think it'll do really, really well. I think you'll do really well with it. So make sure you let me know when the exhibition is coming up, so that I can tell everyone that is available to come or nearby to come and take a look at that in the flesh. That would be incredible. But once again,
Yeah.
thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, that was great.
And guys, we'll wrap it up there. But make sure, have a look in the description. We have we have Pamela's website, we have Instagram, we have Facebook. So jump over there, give that a like and a follow. Once again, hit the like button on this and let YouTube know that this is well worth watching. If you're new, if this is the first time you're here, thank you so much for joining us today. You can hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications button. We're back again tomorrow. Remember, guys, tomorrow, if you entered the photo competition, and there was about 300 entries in the end, if you entered the photo competition, I have myself, Tom Putt, and Paul Holan. We're all getting together and we're going to judge the final 32 images tomorrow live on YouTube. So make sure you join us again tomorrow for that one. Once again, thank you so much, Pamela, for joining us. Stay there. Have a quick chat after we wrap it up. Thanks, guys.
Right. Thank you, Adam. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Really, really enjoyed that.
It was
Yeah.
incredible. Absolutely incredible. We'll wrap it up there. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you tomorrow morning. Close this out.